Hey, everybody. Welcome to the September Product and AI SIG as part of Agile Austin. We are very fortunate to have Scott Ziegler here, VP of Product and I believe Technology as well, although I don't know if that's in your actual title, at Valimail, who was just acquired last week by DigiCert. So, really interesting times for Scott, and he's made himself available to talk to us, which is we're so fortunate to go talk about. There's a prompt for that, from idea to impact in minutes. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. This is a little bit about Agile Austin. Been around for a real long time. Here is our current board of directors. We have a new president through the election. Sid Markle became the president after Max Akizi. I don't know how many years he was around, but it was many years. And now Sid is the president, and many people to help in our mission. There are sponsorship opportunities. There are membership opportunities. I am a paid member. You don't need to be a paid member. All of the content is free. We share it all free. There's some benefits that you get if you're a member, and if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to me. But no need. We have six generally, we have these about every month: coaching, scale, book club, leader sig, lean Kanban, and you are at the product and AI sig. We have some cool sponsors. They help us do what we do, including these Meetup and Zoom. Agile Velocity, longtime platinum sponsor, new gold sponsor, ResumeX, and also silver sponsor, Admoria Coaching. If you're a member, you can apply for a professional development scholarship. Please let me know if you'd like more detail on that. And Agile Velocity, great Agile training group. They have a 15%, I think, or some sort of discount. Please use that QR code if you are interested in that. If you're interested in volunteering, everybody that is here, including me, is a volunteer. Please feel free to drop a note to contact@agileaustin.org. Everybody can contribute. This SIG, here's the mission. I won't read it again. We have a lot of folks that are here, but it's the intersection of product and AI and Agile, if you will, all the kinds of things responding to change. And we live in a world that continues to change and evolve. Two co-SIG leaders, me and then Vishal Sheth. And you can see our class here when we joined Agile Austin was 18 years ago, believe it or not. Upcoming events next month, we're going to have Jobs to be Done Meets AI by Tom Evans, principal with Lucrum Group. We also have Elena Leonova, Chief Product Officer at Spryker. I need to get her topic, so she committed to it. She does some podcasts and a bunch of other things, so she has a lot to talk about. But today, we're talking, Scott's going to be talking with us about there's a prompt for that, which is kind of like the Apple, there's an app for that. And now AI means there's a prompt for that, and you can turn it into a working tool in minutes. He's going to share how he's used AI to unblock teams, replace third-party tools, and stand up proof of concepts that transform ideas into impact faster than ever. Scott's been around a couple of decades, SaaS companies, Fortune 500 companies in product. He does an excellent job in technology too, and we're really pleased to have him today. And there's a little bit of contact for me. So there is the content, the official Agile Awesome content. So I hand it over to you, Scott.
All right, give me 1 second and we'll get this all loaded up and we'll go. Or no?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. All right, so today we're going to dive in, and I changed the title just a bit, but as I'm looking at this, there's a prompt for that, turning ideas into impact with AI. We'll be chatting about that fun concept of it used to be there's an app for that, and I fully and firmly believe that there's a prompt for that is where things are headed, and we'll talk through that journey. But it's going to be more about impact, and I encourage you, throw out any questions you might have along the way. We'll have some time for questions at the end as well. But let's start with me. So first, hey, I'm Scott. Great to meet you. As Matt mentioned, I'm based in Denver. I didn't grow up in Denver. I actually grew up in Ohio, so I'm one of those Colorado transplants that lots of folks talk about. But I like to say I came here before it was cool. I've been working in the tech space since 2003, and that's when I got to come out to Colorado. My career path. So I actually started, believe it or not, as a teacher. That's what I wanted to be. When I grew up, I wanted to be a teacher. I went to a small school in Ohio to be a high school math teacher. I got my teaching certification, and like many teachers, I got lured away and into the world of corporate, and actually started my career with the job offer at IBM in Boulder. I started as a software engineer, was coding in all sorts of fun languages like C or even Java a little bit, but this is definitely back in the day before, we were doing waterfall. Agile wasn't even really a thing at the time, and we went through that transition from waterfall into agile, and that's when I learned about the product owner role and where product management plays a slightly different role. And I said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. So I moved out of engineering and into product management at that time, and ultimately worked my way into being able to be in executive roles. So I've been head of product, I've been head of product and engineering, I've done a few different things, and actually been able to drive two different startups into an acquisition exit, which is great. As Matt just said, the most recent one is here at Valimail. We were acquired by DigiCert, and we're just in the sort of next steps there. But let's see, as far as me, if you want to know as many products as maybe I have built, my best products I ever built are there in the bottom left-hand corner, my two kids. So I'm a dad first and do the rest of this stuff as best as I can around that. My passions include fly fishing, chicken wings, and if you look closely, you will see that fly fisherman is actually eating a chicken wing. Thank you, AI. But yeah, that's me. I'm not tied to Austin, but I've got some indirect ties. So I spent a decent chunk of my career at a company called Return Path. We had a an Austin office. I got to go down and was right there at Sixth and Congress and actually spend some time with Dan Corbin and the rest of the team that was there for a few years until that ultimately I think we all sort of moved in our own different directions and parted ways. But Austin still has a great place in my heart. And thanks so much for the chance to chat with folks today. So let's dive into it. Apple told us there's an app for that. And man, that was an iconic thing. I remember this. This is where you're getting into this was the iPhone. This was everything was at your fingertips, finally at your fingertips. You could do anything that you could imagine. You just had to go to that app store and find something for it. And everyone was building apps or ways to work through things. It just completely changed the world. What I am proposing here is I think the world's about to change a little more. And what we're going to talk about is it's not so much that there's an app for that, there's a prompt for that. And today is going to chat through all of the different ways that AI is starting to influence how we work, what we do, and even unlocking some new things, which I'll give some specific examples as we walk through this. All right, so my AI journey. I started, I want to say the early days. I don't know if this was exactly the early days, but 2022 and into 2023 is when I first got started into AI. And it was when I was working at a company. We were adopting the Amazon working backwards process. And it was, write the PR and your press release and then have the FAQ section. And I had no idea what I was doing because I hadn't done that before. And I had a mentor coming from Amazon, and she said, just go get on ChatGPT, try it there, plug that all in, see how it would go. And I did. I hadn't really experimented with it much, and I said, this is awesome. But what I quickly found was it was awesome at writing that press release. It's kind of junk at writing the FAQ. So when you're trying to figure out that AI was not very intelligent at the time, it was good at kind of putting the words together, but it hadn't really taken that next step. But I really also said, well, what about that? Let me try some other things. I wanted to get back into some of that coding. And like I said, I started my career as a developer and kind of getting pulled back into it a bit as AI is making it more attainable to start to step into this. And I said, cool, let me dust off my Python skills, which were minimal to say the least. And it did not go well either. I guess what I basically found out is in 2022 and in heading into 2023, It really wasn't quite what I expected it would be. I saw some great hope, some great promise, but it wasn't there for me. And so I kind of gave up on AI and I said, I don't know if this is really going to catch fire. I don't know if this is really for me. I can see how it's helpful in kind of wordsmithing things, but it wasn't really there on how I would apply it or how it would take that sort of next step for me. But then I came to Valimail, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about is Valimail. We specifically have, and I would have told you this didn't seem important to me, but looking back on it, hugely important. At Valimail, we were encouraged to look at AI, and not just encouraged. We went as far as creating an AI usage policy. We went into the whole framework of here's what you can do with it, here's how you're allowed to use it. We got a private instance of ChatGPT so we could have the corporate side. We didn't have to worry about you're just putting stuff into the free world. Are you leaking out corporate secrets, other types of things. And I'll say, looking back, that was super, super influential. I was in an early beta group. I got to try it all out, but just having the endorsement from the company to dive into it and knowing you had the reassurance that if it did something dumb, you were doing it with the approval of the company was super helpful. So I put this here as if you are in a world where you're allowed to, or you're starting to get into the world of AI, or if the company's starting to put those policies out, take advantage of it, try it out. And if you aren't, if you're in a spot that you can influence that, to me, that was something that really opened the door and got me much more open and confident, leaning in and doing things with AI. So let's talk about it wasn't just AI. What was it? Well, I actually got an early introduction to Bolt. And I know there's a lot of different options out there, but this has turned into being this is my dev environment. I got to play around with Bolt.new. And I'm going to say this changed my expectations completely because having something that was less of how you're going to write some Python code, maybe run some things locally. With Bolt, it changed this into here's how you can quickly spin something up. You can put a web app around it. You can change an interface. And it really just had AI click for me. So this was a huge, huge, huge step forward. I joked, it was my CTO at the time, had just gotten back from a developer meetup and said, people are talking about this thing. It seems like it's starting to catch on. You should go take a peek. And I just said, look, I feel like I'm just like talking to Jarvis here. And I'm just saying, do this, do this, do this. And all of this stuff is popping up. And it was absolutely eye-opening and amazing. And this is even in the early days. And what we'll talk about here is how this has evolved over time and where things are going. So let's talk a little bit about that. One of the first things that I saw, one of the places that I used Bolt was it was actually faster to go into something like Bolt, tell it what I was hoping to get done, and build an app than it was to go find an app. And I don't know if y'all have been there before. Like you want something. I live in a Valimail's in a very technical space. We work in email authentication. A lot of the things that you want to do are tied to RFCs and different standards. So it's public and it's there and it's helpful. But if you want to do something with it, you're almost trying to find a tool that's out there and manipulate it to what you might need, or take the output of that and then go change it again and change it again and try to get it exactly where you want it to be. It was easier for me to just ask Bolt to put something together than it was to try to manipulate the outcomes or the output that came from somebody else's app. But it's not just that. It was also helped with some of those engineering questions you sometimes get. The default reaction. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before, but you ask for something and engineers are, the default reaction is, that's going to be too hard. Or you don't understand with all of the data and all of the things we have to do, that's just not possible. And what I found was using prompts and using these POCs and just putting some light work together, it was quick to say, you sure about that? Have you thought about this? I mean, at the end of the day, these POCs were allowing me to unblock engineers and kind of lean into some new thinking. So what we're going to talk about today is how that came together and exactly what that was, and then we'll do a little bit of the lessons learned from there. So the first example that I have for us to chat through today is something that I call our BIMI simulator. Now, if you're not in the email world, if you aren't familiar with email authentication, you might say, what the heck is BIMI? BIMI is actually if you go into your Gmail and you see a little icon at the top of your Gmail for a brand, and you say, huh, that doesn't always show up. That only shows up sometimes. That is tied to the world and space that we live in email authentication. And so this idea of getting your logo to show up in Google is a big thing for marketers, for anyone who's doing email marketing. And what we wanted to do was find a way to basically help marketers know about this, help them learn about this, see the potential with it. And if you think of this, in my world, we scan like 100 million domains every single day just to see what's going on, what's happening. Do they have BIMI logos? Do they not? It's a huge data set. And so we wanted to build a BIMI simulator that would say, let's see the logos that are out there. Let's get some inspiration around this, help you see what's happening there. And the initial reaction from engineering is, whoa, not possible. How are we ever going to try to go through 100 million different examples and find all of these things and figure all of this out? You just don't understand, Scott. There's a lot. There's a lot that we have to do there. And I said, okay, I don't understand. You're right. I don't understand. So I used Bolt as a way to kind of tie all of this together. And I didn't do this tying into our data. I didn't do this in any other sort of way. I just said, look, let's think about this differently. Let's almost hack our way into this. I used open DNS endpoints to go out and query what was available out in the wild. I used Bolt to connect all of those things through. I simulated some different sets of customers that we might want to look at. And I threw the whole thing together, as you'll see on the bottom left there, of this is what it could look like. And there were assumptions of, oh, well, the loading on this is going to be hard, and we don't know how many images we can do, and it's just going to be really slow and clunky. And man, this thing was zippy. It just worked. It was great. And I had the first, my PM team said, Scott, how'd you do that? One. And we talked about some of the things that you can do with the prototype. But more importantly, the engineer said, oh, actually, I hadn't thought of it that way. If we don't have to query all 100 million, if we can actually start to load some that we know are going to be there already, if we can start to monitor this a little differently, if we could arrange this with this minimal type of information, and oh my gosh, these logos are actually really tiny and they load really fast, it opened up a whole different side of thinking. So what you'll see there on the right is actually that's our production version of this. It's in our free product. You can go in and you can go look at all of the different BIMI logos that are out there in the wild. And there's a lot of them. And we monitor this regularly to see those different pieces and see what's coming through. So in this case, what this did is it took that concept of we can't do that. That's not possible to, let's actually think through this a little differently. And putting it in PM terms, this wasn't, hey, let's do a spike and how many days do you need to dive into all of this? This was absolutely I got a couple hours. Let me see what I can pull together. Can I show this to you tomorrow? And can I kind of get some new thinking happening? And yes, we still did all of the productionizing, all of the other things. Don't get me wrong, like that was still necessary. But it unblocked us earlier in the phase to say, this is sort of that next step. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this got our customers exactly what they were looking for. Was a huge deal for us to show this, and we were first in, to bring this to industry in a way that nobody else was doing. And it all started with a silly idea typed into a Bolt prompt to pull some of these things together.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah,
there's
go.
this saying that I love. It's like everything's impossible until somebody sees that it's done. Like how many times in your career have you heard that's impossible and then
We all know this. We all know this, and this isn't again. This isn't a knock on engineering. Let's be fair. If we're in product, we also say the same thing. Hey,
that's
can we do this thing? The answer is nope. Got my roadmap planned. And it isn't until you actually get convinced that you should look at it a little deeper to go back and change these things. We all know that's just easier to say no. It just can't be done. And then, no, it's not possible. And I like to say, why can't we? Why can't we? Let's look at this a little differently. Let's switch that. Instead of saying we can't, let's look at what could we do? Why can't we try this? Let's push ourselves. And so for me, this was just again, a key piece to start to unblock that. But like I said, this is one of those examples of a POC out of the product org, drove something that goes completely all the way through to production and now out and used by, right now, this is live for about 100,000 customers, which is great. All right, next one. Marketing tools. All right. So this one to me, I don't know if y'all have ever lived through this. This is my engineering half that's saying this. Like the bane of existence of engineers is, oh, I had to build that tool for marketing. And that's just sort of out there. Or even worse, marketing built their own tool. And now they're asking us if we can fix this or if we can dive in on this and what can we do with this. And so we got a few of those. We got a few of those that are hanging out, and a few that were built by third party contractors the marketing team brought in, or something that's just sort of living out on the web. And let's be honest, they're important. They're important to your marketing team. They're important to your brand. They're important to everything that you're doing. So in this case, I'm going to give you three different examples here. These are three different ones, but what I did is leveraged AI just to basically help me learn. And what I mean by that is you get these legacy apps that nobody wants to touch and nobody really understands. And I said, couldn't we just rewrite it? And I know, again, engineers, they don't want to hear that. Sometimes they do. But nobody wants to say, hey, let's just start over. So what I said is, you don't have to. Let me try. And again, this is I can step in, I can try this out. And so I took what we currently have as a domain checker, a free tool that's maintained by our marketing team, uses some APIs into the engineering database, but I basically built my own version around it through Bolt and said, let me just use this to understand things a little more. I want to see how hard it is to pull some of this data in. I want to understand what we're trying to show, what that story is. This was really more about me learning than it was trying to replace something. It was just, I want to get an understanding of what could be feeding that app and how I might be able to rethink it. So I built a new version and we use this internally. This is not out there. This is not replacing what's out there for the marketing team. But what this allowed me to do was I showed how, one, it doesn't have to be this big mystery that we're worried about. If something were to happen to that app, we could rebuild it. Definitely possible, definitely could happen. But even that, it showed that we could extend it a little differently. We've talked about adding new fields or maybe updating this or changing it. I showed how you could do those things more to drive it from a data level and then show it in a very simple UI. But that opened up some different thinking of what's possible to kind of take next steps on that web app. But even that middle one, this is a little different. This is where marketing team says, man, our competition, they have these other tools that are out there. And I see their SEO and they're kicking our butts with some of these things. Can't you all just build this? And the answer is no. We're not going to pull over the whole entire engineering team to build some web apps to help you with SEO. We're going to keep focused on building our enterprise app. But hey, let me see what I can do. So I got to dive in on this and I said, well, we can pull in this DKIM checker that's very similar to some of the competition offerings. And I said, look, it's not hard for us to build something like this. We could pull something like this together. And whether it's going to be engineering building this or whether it's going to be the marketing team working with an outside contractor, it got us to a point to say, oh, it's feasible, it's possible. And again, most of these things are coming together in days, maybe even hours. This specific DKIM checker, I remember I talked about it with the marketing person in the morning, and I had her something by the end of the day, and it just blew her mind. Absolutely blew her mind. It actually started this joke of, we're using Scott's vibe coding, and that sort of stuck around. It's okay, like vibe coding gets a bad rap, but it's not so bad when it's helping to show that you can unblock things, that you can pull things together. And I'll go to that far right example. So this is another one of Scott's fun vibe coding, exercises, but this one we actually use. So this one I built within Bolt, and we're using it because it was faster for me to put together a web form and to generate results than it was for us to go to our web contractors and have them build it. So we're in a spot where we're starting to dabble a little with some of these things, something simple like a web form. Again, that's not complex, but it shows how you can easily pull this together and tie this in and use it in interesting ways. And I got to experiment with how the heck do you tie this into Marketo forms and all of the things that I just never did. But guess what? I just asked ChatGPT, like, what the heck do I do if I had this sort of code? And I worked with how I might have to put some of these tags in, and it guides you through it and it helps. And while sure I have a computer science background, a lot of this is just understanding some logic flows and being able to pull that together. So that's my marketing example. And I'm gonna switch now to the last one. And this is really the one that I would say this is where what inspired this talk. So support team. This is the one where it is so much easier these days. Again, you can say this is specific to my industry, but I bet you all can find some parallels here. it is easier to build apps with prompts than it is to try to go find something, find an app that does what you need. In this case, our support team was using a lot of different third-party tools. They were using things that were out there in the wild. They were even in some cases using our competitors' stuff. And you got to be cautious with that because you don't know who's scraping what from where, who's looking at what company domains and things you're putting in. It was just a real weird sort of flow, but it was what they needed to get their job done. And we had a whole backlog of they had all the requests. Engineering, can you build this, 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 this? It came through the product team. And of course, we don't want to pull over for revenue driving things to say, hey, let's just optimize this for the support team. We would love to, but it's always a trade-off. And typically in those trade-offs, support team, internal team, they lose. And the customer, wins, or at least the revenue side wins. So what I started doing is saying, hey, if I could do that little thing for the marketing team, what if I did this? Now, let's be clear, these are probably not going to scale. These aren't things that I would want the world to go use. But what we started building was some really interesting internal tools that has absolutely streamlined how our support team operates. I got a whole page in Confluence. They got little tools and things that they can go tweak. Again, specific to our industry, but in a certain way, that's even better. We're talking about SPF records and flattening and all sorts of DNS queries and other things that are out there. How you might take DMARC reports and parse them and figure these different pieces of information out all the way to that far right one. This is a fun one. This is a world threat map where I just pulled up the country of Mexico, and this tells you all of the IPs compromised in Mexico sending out spam within the world. These are fun little things that one can be important from the left of, hey, you have to do this in your job as your support person, all the way over to the right of you can just show up educated when you're working with the customer and give different insights. And we did all of this streamlined in such a way that if we wanted to, sure, we could throw them into some sort of a support tool. But in this case, they're just different, URLs and different interfaces and different ways that we can now train up an offshore support team quickly, walk them through how to use all of these tools. And we know that any customer data that they're using or any research that they're doing on this is staying 100% within us and what we built and what we own instead of potentially, lingering out on different tools or free tools out on the internet. So in that case, there
Hey, Scott,
absolutely was a prompt for that. Go ahead, Matt.
can I? Yeah. So what's interesting being an engineering leader and thinking about all of the tools that the teams I've served as leader have built for support or marketing, they're the quality bar, if you will, is the same, right? So it's kind of like I wouldn't I can think of all the ones that I have right now, and they're really useful. They're really helpful for support, helps them get their jobs done, accessing customer account information. There's all sorts of reasons you wouldn't want to put them on the public web. But there's all sorts of other reasons too, just in case, in terms of scalability and like sort of how they look and feel, the user experience, all these kinds of things. Sure, I mean, I almost think that some of these things that you might be building might even be better because it's kind of like the user experience is probably one of the things that these engineering built tools like, oh, we just got to do this, we just got to do this. It's probably going to have the worst user experience, which is our partners in sales ops, support, customer support, account management, you name it. Like they're going to have the worst experience because it's the same thing on the UX side too. And just looking at these tools, they look very pleasant. The user experience looks very pleasant. When I think about some of the tools that we built, they don't. So,
It's
um,
come a long way. It's come a long way. You're not wrong here. And this is the sort of thing where you absolutely can just let the style guide sort of work. And we're going to talk a little more about some of the potholes to avoid here, or some of the things that I learned along the way. But it's come a long way. And I take this back to my very first chance to experiment with Python libraries and having the crappiest looking thing you could possibly imagine running local on my machine to this being that leap to say, oh yeah, this is just there and done in a web app and done in a way. One of the bigger wins with this is that privacy side. A lot of this stuff, it's going to just run in the browser. There's nothing running server side. It just runs out there. So you don't have to worry about what's getting where. And this is all just running there and being done and being handled. There's some nice things to that you can do, and the world's come a long way in what's possible, even just possible in that. But you're right, the UI side to this, bringing in style guides, the tailwinds piece, all of that just sort of comes out of the box without needing to do something crazy or extreme. And I'll also mention, like, this is where the engineers sometimes they get a little nervous of, well, Scott, what do we have to do with this? This is not the code we write in. We're a Ruby and Rails stack with a little bit of Go on the back end, and I wrote all of these in TypeScript with React. Like, no one's expecting this to just translate over. That's okay. This is just to get a job done and to tweak some things. And I'll be honest, even when somebody says, "Oh, I think I found a bug," fixing these things and debugging these things is not nearly as hard as you might think. And even because you ran this in a library and you did this, in my case within Bolt, I just pulled the project back up. It has the history on it, and I talk through what I want to get changed or adjusted along the way. And that's it. It's actually been kind of fun to dive into. So with that, and that's a great transition into lessons learned. Let's talk about vibe coding versus vibe debugging. I have found that the majority of my time is actually spent vibe debugging than it is vibe coding. Vibe coding's super simple. It's amazing how fast something comes together. It's amazing how quickly that sort of happy path works. It's when you start getting into some of those edge cases. And what I will say here is I learned some things along the way. So I'll share those learnings. Y'all can agree or disagree with, which is fine. But debugging inside of Bolt, be very cautious with that. And what I mean by that is this is the first time I ever felt the crunch of, oh, am I gonna hit my limit on credits? Because it wants to go through and rewrite the entire app and rewrite everything every time you're trying to do a different little debug statement or something else. I learned early on it was better to let it maybe have a chance. If you haven't used something like Bolt, it'll literally be building your code and deploying your code, and it'll say, ran into an issue. Do you want me to try to fix it? And I just click the button and say, have at it. Let's see what happens. But you'll get stuck in loops sometimes. Sometimes it'll run through the same problem over and over and over again. Don't fear. I just go over to ChatGPT and I say, hey, Bolt's struggling over here. Can you help me? And I get my second opinion. And to be honest, it's great. Now, what I've also seen is ChatGPT sucks at how it integrates that code back in. It is not good at that. It wants to just give you the little tiny code fragments and say, oh, yeah, I found this error. Just replace this with this. It assumes you wrote that code. I didn't write that code. I don't know where that code is. So then I got to go back to Bolt and find it. So there's a little bit of a marriage here of you got to know what you can do where. But for me, debugging in ChatGPT and dumping code in and saying, look at this and tell me what's wrong is way easier and more efficient than trying to do all of that debugging over on the side within Bolt. But having that second opinion is super, super helpful. Now, it's not just that. I actually thought, oh, well, I'm going to just use ChatGPT then. It knows how to do all of this stuff. Brilliant idea, right, Scott? Wrong. This is where I went to ChatGPT and said, hey, I'm using Bolt. I want you to help me write a prompt to put into Bolt that's going to do this sort of thing. And I thought I'd do this whole trend of, ask the AI what it should post to the AI, and this is going to be cool. And it gave me very specific prompts that actually worked well. But as soon as I wanted to modify them, like went so far down a rabbit hole, it was hard to get out to something bigger. So I found it was easier and better to start with a higher level, less sophisticated prompt in Bolt to get your scaffolding, to get your general sort of framework, to get all of that pulled together, and then go deeper than it was to start with something very specific that almost cornered you into here's exactly how you have to put all of this together. Go do it because it was brittle and hard to adjust from that point forward. And it's where I kept running into issues with Bolt would be wanting to overwrite something or go back to something because that first prompt in the spirit of what I was asking for was so specific that it was causing it to be less flexible on other things that it could do. So that's just something to watch out for. I will say there's still value in that idea of I want to do this, what would be a good prompt? But I don't take it word for word out of ChatGPT because every time I do that, it puts me in an awkward spot and Bolt that I don't like, doesn't line up. And Matt, going back to some of your styling, it'll actually take it down a whole different sort of style sheet in other places because it's thinking I got these words and I need to do these things. Whereas I just stay in the happy path, it all sort of plays together. My different apps look similar and look like they could fit into something, which is important when I'm handing them off to the support team. All right. So what's coming? This is my crystal ball here. I'm going to give you my take on it. Is that idea of building beyond prototypes? According to Bolt, they just sent me an email, a couple weeks ago. This is all coming. They're helping you kind of bring that agent side in. I think you're going to bring Claude Code in. You're going to do some other sorts of things. I've got my engineering team, working on Cursor and Claude Code, and they're giving opinions on that too. But one of the things that I have heard from them is the difference on those agents is they're starting to teach. They're starting to explain. They're not just coding. And that's a very important step, especially for onboarding new engineers. So we've started using things like Cursor and Claude Code when we're bringing folks into our development stack and saying, use this to not just have to figure out it's not to say, hey, just code and just write something or here's what you need to do, but help understand where this fits, why you might leverage it. And that's been a huge step. That's recent in the last couple months that you've started to see that move, but it's the explanation of what's possible and why that comes together, and even the ability to highlight certain areas of code. Because we've got it's not super old, but it's been through its iterations in about 10 years of a tech stack. And there's probably three or four different examples within your code base of how to do something. And we wanted to lean more towards how we're currently doing it, even though there might be examples of how to do it a different way somewhere buried in the code. Helping get that context of how to do this, that's been the leap between something like GitHub Copilot to moving to Claude Code or to Cursor, at least from the developer's perspective. And then I just have a new engineering leader hiring on, and she said, like, that's what I need. I need Cursor so that I can get up to speed quickly and start to understand some things within the development code in our repos. Can I use that? It was actually something she asked before she accepted the role. That was critical to her because she knew that was going to expedite her ability to understand and to have impact faster than ever. So the last one here, and there's a recent article just a couple days ago that talked about this AI bubble. You can Google and find it. I think it was The Atlantic maybe that put this out. And, it was challenging this idea of a recent study that came out and said, developers are actually slower when they're using AI. And so there's this fear that this is some sort of bubble. And if you thought, the dot-com bubble is going to be huge, just imagine the billions of dollars that are going into AI, and then this whole thing's going to fall on its face. I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's happening. Like I've got the purists on my team. I got the folks who don't want anything to do with AI. I've also got folks that have started to adapt how they approach this. I don't know that AI for coding is quite there, but I have seen the leaps it's taken in the last 12 to 18 months. I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen how good it can be. I've seen how it can take somebody slightly technical and make me feel like I'm, Iron Man and doing all of this fun stuff. But it's coming, and I don't think it's stopping. So I don't see this as an AI bubble. I see this as maybe just a chance to reskill and skill up and maybe even think about your processes a little differently. So that is my general take on it, but I'm happy to talk through that or any other questions you had on what we chatted through today. So the things to think about here are what are your thoughts on all of this, what we just talked through? What I get right, what I miss. So while you're thinking through that, I just do encourage you next time you run into a blocker, whether this is a blocker with engineering, whether this is a blocker with trying to find an app to do a certain thing, whether you're just frustrated. I had my COO joked and told me I should build his restaurant review app for him because he struggles with trying to hop between Google and Yelp and all of the stars and the fake reviews and the real reviews. I said, dude, we could build that. That's not hard. It's this sort of thing. Is there a prompt for that? And the answer, in my opinion, is there's almost always a prompt for that. Definitely things that don't always work out the way that I might want, but so many things that have, and I think it's only going to get better. So thank you all for the time today. Very much appreciate this. Let's shift into if anyone has thoughts, questions. This is the interactive portion of the presentation. So with that, what are your thoughts? And I'm happy to be challenged on this. I'm going to be the first one to tell you I have not gotten all of this right, I am sure. But what resonated, or is there anything that didn't resonate? And what's your experience with some of these things? I'd love to talk through it. And by the way, the teacher in me says you can be very comfortable with silence. You just have to let these things sort of sink in. So I think I'm supposed to count to 10 slowly or something like that. And there's even that they gave us this acronym, WAIT. Why am I talking? So we'll just be comfortable with silence until somebody has a thought they may want to bring up.
I mean, I definitely have a lot of strong opinions on this, and I really love the presentation. I especially loved the examples and especially the way that you're using it. Like one of the comments I put in the chat was just the fact that your approach and your willingness to just say, all right, well, we're just going to go in and build that was very lean, very agile, very scrappy. And I love that the examples were like, all right, we're going to use this and we're going to have impact in doing it. And I feel like you were taking things off of engineering's plate, helping out those marketing, those sales teams, those customer support. So I just thought it was really great examples to show, hey, this is another way that product people can be impactful and they should be using AI. AI is already table stakes for any product person. So this is just another example. Uh, and I put in the chat, like if you haven't been playing with these tools, try it because as you know, you said, it's fun. And I've been teaching AI for over 2 years. And when I first started teaching, we built kind of apps, but we would have to run the HTML, run the CSS, run the JavaScript, copy and paste. Now, with two prompts, we've got these high fidelity prototypes that are doing these amazing things. And it's like, as you demonstrated, the leap in technology and just how fast it's moving. So when I and that previous or two screens previously, when you said, "Hey, this is where things are going," I mean, I agree because it's moving that fast. I don't think it's definitely not going backwards. This is an AI revolution, and you're going to see these tools just become part of the way teams work going forward. So I don't have a question. I love the examples.
I love it,
Uh,
Dan, and thank you for the encouragement on it. And I guess I'm just going to pile on a little of it is that. It's just try it. Your mileage may vary. I understand that too. Try different tools, try different things. But if you're holding back, thinking this is just going to be a dud or this is just not going to come together, at least for me, this has been like this is my assistant, this is my teammate, this is my way to work through things. This is my way around engineering doesn't have time or marketing's asking for dumb stuff or any way that you want to think of this. Like this is how I get it done. And it helps. It helps everybody. And at the end of the day, that ultimately helps our customers because that means that we're able to do different stuff. And we're not, I can lead a certain investigation, I can unblock a certain path, I can do these things. And I think this is the future of what PMs are going to be expected to do. And I know this isn't just a PM audience, but I'm going to frame it that way of this is that leaning into and saying, I want to understand this more. I want to see what I can do with this, and I want to see what options are there.
Yeah, and I will also add that I've seen teams who they took snapshots of their products, non-technical people. They loaded it up in these tools and they worked on it and they were able to get stakeholder buy-in faster. So they were able to get everyone to understand how they were going to solve a problem and why, it basically talk through usability issues and things like that and hand something off to the engineers with better context, with better alignment, with better momentum. And now what they handed off, they weren't like, oh, here, go take this. Obviously, the engineers still needed to do a lot with that to make it production ready. But they knew that once they went and took that and went and built that into the actual production code, it was going to be a success when it launched. So that's another reason why I think it's really helpful for PMs to use.
Yeah, and you can bring this back to, I mean, some of you may have remembered the kind of prototyping tools and things, even from a UX perspective, and how some of this has evolved. And the idea of what used to just be, things drawn on a piece of paper, then turned into interactive prototypes that you can start to work through, that you're getting into a spot now where this isn't just interactive, sort of view, and this isn't just kind of click here and it shows the screen type thing. You actually can get to working prototypes and super fast. We haven't played around with. There is a Figma integration into Bolt, and there's some other sorts of things. I think those are all going to start to push on this too. But I do feel these should be things that are in any PM's toolkit, and we're using it that way. I was sort of the pilot for this, but getting our PMs access to something, something like Bolt. But I will also, caution, you can definitely get yourself kind of go down a rabbit hole. And I have found many late evenings where I don't realize that I have, spent quite a bit more time than I initially intended trying to get something working. But it does help to connect and even have a little more empathy for what goes on the technical side to get some of the stuff done.
I am curious because obviously I don't want to dominate, but is anyone else in the call use these tools?
Well, I encourage you to give them a shot. And if you want to go into something like Bolt, you can start off there, free accounts if you want to play around with it. Again, you don't have to use this for work. Use this for your own restaurant ratings or other sorts of things. It's fun if you've ever wanted to dabble in the world of how you might use APIs. You don't need Postman anymore. You can use something like this. It'll tie in Axios. It'll let you hit the different endpoints. You can put in your credentials. You can do all sorts of fun, different things. There's ways to do that. I've used it that way to even demonstrate our corporate API out to customers and how you could build an integration. There's just a lot of things that I think this opens up, and I do feel that this is good to dabble in. It's good to get your a little more understanding of how some things might come together. And again, you're not using this to replace your dev team or to do something like that. But for me, diving in and understanding how some things work, seeing a little more of how you might pull that together, understanding what, parameters you could change or tweak or things along the way. That's all been super, super helpful.
I'll fill in an open space here. Um, if there's no other comments, I hope it's not just Dan and I talking. But one of the things that I thought about, Scott, when you were going through this, I was going back to support, and I was thinking about my time at Amazon Web Services, and probably some of the folks here. I think Ben Rogers probably worked at AWS or worked at Amazon for some time. Very customer obsessed. The support people are ridiculously customer obsessed, and I got a chance. Most Amazonians, when you go there, you start off by sitting in calls. Like you literally sit and take calls with somebody else. You listen in. It's how you're onboarded, and it's very cool. And what I observed was the support people, because they have to get all this different information from all these systems and put it all together. They had this massive compilation of Taper Monkey scripts, which were the scripts that ran in. Um, I don't think they ran with it just Firefox. Maybe it was Firefox and Chrome. I can't remember. Maybe it was just Firefox, but it was almost like a homegrown set of scripts that you could almost call them I mean, they're probably non-engineers because it wasn't software engineers who built this, but they were all trading them and sharing them, and they were all loading them up. They must have had, some of these guys would have hundreds and hundreds of these Taper Monkey scripts to do all this stuff to get their job done. And it was, it was like members of support who were not programmers, they were not technical, that had built up this library of things to do their job. And they were like wonky and weirdo, and it made the screen get all goofy and stuff, but they all knew how to use it because it solved them like from going to 16 different things and trying to get information quickly for the people on the phone that were, customers that, get excited if you don't resolve their problems quickly. So, if I went back even way far back for some of those, we mentioned IBM, Scott, like early on in my career, I was at IBM, and there was a product called Lotus Notes that some of you might have remembered. And it was sort of like the other kind of like business folk could start writing their own applications to do workflow management, access data, all these other kinds of things. And it's interesting, kind of like, is AI going away? And like, it's automation. It's like the next kind of automation, and that word democratize, it'd be interesting to like see how this happens. So that's my
Yeah.
statement. I guess my question could be, I wonder, are you seeing anything where other departments, maybe get influenced by product, or I don't know if they get influenced by engineering as much, but I think they get influenced more by product saying, "Hey, I'm not a developer, but I can do this stuff." And then they kind of start doing their own kind of things. And I don't know, have you seen that? And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it dangerous? Is it an opportunity?
It can be a good thing. It can definitely be a little dangerous as well. I think the support example is spot on. I mean, those support tools is for a lot of things I did, I was replacing shell scripts and other stuff that
Right.
the support team was trying to run local on machines, and it was hard to train somebody how to do these things and what to use in which places. You just put a nice looking UI on front of that that does the same sort of thing, and it streamlines all of that. So support loves this and loves how quickly you can spin these sorts of things up. I know that the marketing team is intrigued by this. I know that they're using, so in the same way I told you I had to put like little Marketo entries and tie-ins and all of that. I encouraged them, just go into ChatGPT. Here's the payload I'm sending over. Use it to figure out what snippet you have to put into the WordPress template in order to pick all of this up. They did. And they started to see that they could actually do things that they didn't have to go to their web contractor for. And instead of putting in a ticket and waiting weeks, they were able to get stuff done in days. And I think we're just on the edge of some of those things too, where it is going to open up some more technical capabilities to folks and help people feel technical. And I say that feel technical because this doesn't make you technical. Let's be clear. There's still a step to this too. And anyone who wants to push back on this has every right to push back and say, Scott, but you had a foundation in computer science and math, and you looked at these things and you were a developer. 100% true. 100% true. If you just put somebody in front of a prompt and said build an app, you have to almost know how right now to ask for certain things and how to have it look at certain things. And I've even found sometimes it's hitting limitations and I have to remind it that it's probably the free service throttling it and it's not put a fix in it and all sorts of things like that. So there is a still an element here of this isn't replacing developers. This isn't doing there's a side of this where you just have to embrace it. And I think we can all start to learn a little more from it. But yeah, specifically, I've seen marketing be able to go in and do stuff they probably didn't even realize was possible. And I have seen the support team be able to, they're technical folks, but this just makes their lives that much easier. And then there's still the folks that still want to use those old shell scripts and don't want to change anything. That's perfectly fine. Keep using what you're using. I'm not gonna force you to change your approach, but just knowing this is here, knowing it's possible. I love the idea that anybody could build an app. Again, you're in that world. That's where this all came from. Is there's a prompt for that. You don't have to use somebody else's app. And if your workflow needs to work a little differently, if you want to do something differently, you don't have to wait for somebody else. Just go do it. Go build it. But that's where this gets a little slippery to me too. I don't want 12 people having 12 different variations of an app that's so similar when you could have just done one. But it's
Right.
there. It's possible. We'll see how this catches on.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just sort of blown away by how social it was. All these different support folks that were just trading all these things back and forth. And it is that sort of big company Amazon, but at the same time still sort of scrappy at the edges. It's like there's not something there. And so the people are just going to go off and figure out a way around it. They can't wait for engineering to go build all these different tools and synthesize all this information. It's a lot. So
And
yeah, it's
Matt, I think kind of a tangential point to
yeah.
yours as well. And sorry, I missed a good portion of the presentation. I'll watch the recording later because it sounds great.
Super horrible, probably not even worth watching, but thanks for I appreciate it.
Oh, Matt will work his editing wonders, so Gemini movie. But yeah, so I think one of the things that strikes me is that cloud adoption took forever. In other words, there were privacy concerns, where's my data going and stuff like that. And what we've seen is a rapid uptake in companies, much more so than cloud, because they got comfortable with cloud and having their data owned essentially by someone else with, whatever privacy guarantees are there. And we're seeing those AI tools start to become adopted at very large companies now that drag their feet for many years on cloud native. So I think that's really also going to be an accelerant as the barriers break down and AI companies also figure out what the privacy aspects look like to satisfy companies to sign that deal. So I think, I've seen over the last, say, even 6 months at the company I work for that is just the proliferation of tools and the agreements signed and things that are available to us is grown exponentially. So I think that also plays into it. Not sure if you covered that.
We did cover it actually briefly, and it's a great call out. I know that it seems silly, but the thing that had me the most comfortable diving into these tools was a corporate policy that said you're allowed, and having backing behind it that you weren't going to somehow get your wrist slapped for using the wrong thing, and having it be done on in some sort of privacy safe and corporate IP safe way. All of those are important. Now, that doesn't mean you can't dabble in this to start to understand it and play in your own free, sandbox and do other things, but don't put your corporate IP in there. Don't do those other types of things until you get to the right place that you've got the sign off on it. But for Valimail, we were a little ahead on that, and that was huge for us as being able to say we had an AI usage policy and we had a set of approved tools and we're able to use them. That opened these doors.
Yeah. Hey, folks, it is I guess 4 o'clock Austin time, so it's been an hour. I really appreciate everybody. Your presence is the greatest present we could have, either live in this meeting or watching on the recording. There's lots of email addresses out there if you're interested in any sort of follow-up. I'm available. I'm matt.roberts@agileaustin.org, and there's so many other people that have shared their contact information. So um, feel free to reach out to Scott. I think he left his email address. And, if that's it, we'll see y'all next month. Scott, thank you so much. Great, great session. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, folks. We'll see you.
All right. Cheers, all.